Morning, Mike.
Oh, hello. What are you glued to, Cameron?
Just your screen, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. What do you do for a living, Cameron?
I'm a carpenter.
A carpenter, right. So how safe is that for the climate?
Well, I work with timber, which is a much more sustainable material rather than concrete. I also
But you work with
retrofit.
trees that have been cut down then, don't you?
It's a sustainable building practice.
How is it sustainable if you're killing trees?
Because it's regenerative, you can grow trees.
Right. Well, you can grow all sorts of things, can't you?
Well, you can't grow concrete.
You can. See you, Cameron. Cheerio. That was Cameron. He grows trees and then cuts them down and then makes things from them. Brilliant. Marvellous. I don't think I ever want to talk to any of those people.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Roast. So we're back once again for another season, and we have two wonderful guests with us today. We'll start with Phil. For anyone who doesn't know, anyone who's living under a rock, Phil, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I have a YouTube channel called A Different Bias, where I comment on mostly British politics with a particular focus on Westminster, so Brexit, and at the moment the clown show that is the Conservative Party.
Very good. Ollie, Bowlerhat Man, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm Ollie. I'm Bowlerhat Man. As you can tell, I'm from God's own country, Yorkshire. But yeah, like I say, I again talk about politics, talk about generally what is going on in the crazy world of bizarre, crazy sometimes UK political world. Doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes, but you know, you look at it and it's like, how the hell have we got here?
My wonderful co-host Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Hiya, my name's Alex, also known as Political X. I'm a historian, author, and my lovely co-host Max. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel, where I talk about politics and Brexit in particular. Alex, what's our first topic for the show this week?
Concrete, growing concrete, the need to build concrete farms. Mike Graham has been brought in as some sort of consultant because only he has the secret to growing concrete. Phil,
The story has yet to set.
Phil, what's going on with the concrete?
Given that Education Secretary managed to spend £36 million on refurbishing her offices, goodness knows what Graham's consultancy fee will be.
I read in my Sun newspaper this morning that you spent £32 million refurbishing your offices, did you?
I don't know, actually. I didn't. I haven't done it.
Looks very nice.
Which offices?
Your offices, Department of Education?
Yeah, I know that when I was last in the department, I was on a different floor, and I know they are refurbishing some of them. But no, I wasn't
Best
involved
use of funds
in that.
at the moment?
Well, I wasn't. I don't know what I guess there's some maintenance requirements that they had on there. I wasn't part of that decision, to be honest. But I'll check when I get back.
But essentially,
But she didn't know about it, allegedly.
Well, then Keir Starmer, the lawyer who has to, pay careful attention to detailing documents, has made a mistake in examining the documents then. Also, the thing is then, so she didn't know anything about it. Who did? Because that's an awful lot of money to spend on office refurbishment. You don't let the office junior decide those things, do you? That is the Secretary of State who decides that. So who does she think? Who has she job shared with that we don't know about?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's the only office refurbishment that's taken place.
So post-war rebuilding, there's a lot of needs to build a lot of buildings very quickly. They use this concrete, which is fine. There's a lot of people say, "Oh, if it was dodgy concrete, why did they use it?" It wasn't dodgy concrete. It was it was particularly suitable for buildings. It was lightweight. It was good for insulating. You just had to be aware that the building will not stay standing reliably above 30 years old. So just replace it. It shouldn't be that hard to replace a building every 30 years. Now, we don't build them like that anymore, so the last ones were built in the 90s, which is presumably the ones on their last legs now. Well, beyond their last legs. So the government, being, Tories being Tories, decided, funding for school budgets. Yeah, we don't really do that. Because as far as they were concerned, why do you need a new building? You've got one, haven't you? Yes, but at some point it will fall down. Yes, but it's not falling down now, is it? So as far as they're concerned,
we can put them in tents. Get the children outside. Get them in tents.
They wouldn't have even thought about that. They will have just thought this building is not falling down. Now, they're probably really annoyed. Gillian Keegan's probably really annoyed. Well, why didn't they tell me which day it would fall down?
Yeah,
that's probably what she's thinking.
I think it was. I can't remember which byline Times was. It was the East. I think it was the East Anglia byline Times.
It was,
who had
yeah.
someone from a whistleblower from our
Yeah,
office said, "Oh yeah, if we can, at least keep quiet about it for the next 2 years, well, it's not our problem."
Yeah, keep
That's
a lid on it.
She hasn't said anything to counter that, but then, do you? Would you?
Well, the thing is, it really doesn't matter because you look at what she's actually done, which is nothing. So whether she said
all
it
I'm
or
going to
not,
say
she may
is
have-
that the
she may as
woman
well have done.
works really hard and just deserves an occasional thanks.
Yeah. I mean, my sympathies
We've
with
got
the
to say
teachers
thank you to her.
and the parents because this is huge disruption, and some of these people disrupted will be in their GCSE years. Not that it, if you knacker 1 year even before GCSE, you then knacker the GCSE year, and some of them may be moved to other schools, which means more overcrowding in classrooms. Some of them in taught in halls or porta cabins.
Disruptive for the kids as well, because that's a big thing to go and get lumped in with a bunch of random kids, potentially in GCSE year, trying to make new friends.
Yeah, and it's coming off the back of COVID as well. So there's still technically teachers are still dealing with all the post-COVID fallout. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to add to it even more.
There was something within that as well, because if they're having to get the kids to work from home, if they can't get them into another school, are they providing them with laptops?
Well, they did last time. So there was a mechanism last time. So I imagine
What, with COVID?
Yeah. Well, they did in my college.
No. There was about 100,000 kids that didn't have laptops because they were too poor. And the schools basically tried to provide their own, but of course they were still limited in the numbers.
Yeah.
I kept abreast about this because actually I was offering to consult with the government on this. And I actually met with the Department of Education on online schools in February. So I was pretty hacked off with them and what they'd done and what they hadn't done and what they hadn't prepared. But it also, it brings in the bigger problem of poverty within the UK. You've got 100,000 kids, which, by the way, is I worked out the numbers the other day. If it's 800 kids per school, 800 to 1,002, I go on the lowest number. If it's 1%, if it's is it meant to be 150 schools, 156? That's 124,000 children that are being limited in their education, or had the potential to have something land and crash onto their heads.
Yeah.
And if you watch the interview with Gillian Keegan and
Nick Gibbs,
Boyd, if you listen to those two, they kept playing it down. It's only 1%.
Yeah.
It's only 5%.
It's only 1%.
The vast majority do not have RAC, but
And most of that is in, in areas that it's not really a danger at all. There's not many of them. The vast majority, there's no suspected RAC.
It's only a small number. It's 124,000.
Well, the thing is, do you know what it is? This is why I keep thinking it's a bit like Partygate then, because there'll be voters out there, parents of these kids, when they're saying it's only 1%. Those parents out there are going, yeah, but that's my kid.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what the next time we get a poll, if this will have affected the polling numbers again.
I mean, the thing is, they're at such a low floor anyway, so you could get it going down a little bit and not really tell anything. But something like this, if they were polling all right, all of a sudden they wouldn't be.
Yeah, I saw. I think it was Conservative Home put out their poll of ministers, and I know Rishi Sunak has slipped back into negative digits again, which doesn't spell good news, to be honest, for him. I think I keep on saying it. He's going to give the performance of a lifetime come the Conservative conference, and I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off.
Well,
there was rumours, I think, last weekend, 40 letters in the 1922 committee. You need 55 to trigger one in the current
53,
numbers.
53.
Wow.
But I'm not sure I believe that. Because the only person who could possibly know is Sir Graham Brady, and he won't say. Whereas there are there are people within the Conservative Party who would like to browbeat others to finish him off, to suggest that this is coming. Or even just to keep him honest. It could just be a ploy to keep him honest, to sort of say to him, you're close, and it doesn't matter that you will win the confidence vote. It will, because what will happen with the confidence vote, he will win it, but unless a child actually dies. But the problem with it'll be is people will tot up the numbers and they'll say, right, this many Conservative MPs backed you. That is less than half of MPs in Parliament, so you do not have the confidence of the House. Now, he'll still be the Prime Minister, but people will just, this is exactly what happened with, say, Boris Johnson. It was like, you do not actually. So Labour, every time Sunak, I mean, they've already made some inroads in the fact that Sunak's had to back down to rebellions, but every time it happens now, they'll say, that's because you don't have a majority. You are running a minority government.
Do you think the ERG have up sticks and just gone, we're against him? Or
I don't think they're even a viable.
No, they're too split. Like, they officially objected to the Windsor framework, and over half of the ERG members still voted for it. So, or at least failed to vote against it. Yeah. So they advised their own members to adopt a particular position and couldn't even persuade them.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show you the fracturing in the Conservative Party there is.
Yes.
That I think it was mainly that Brexit that brought them all together, and now that there isn't that.
Well, the problem is it made it worse, really, because it created this huge influx of MPs. You know, we call them Red Wall MPs, but they have a fundamentally different need to what you might call the Blue Wall MPs, which is the more traditional MPs, but in vulnerable seats. So the Tory heartlands want low taxes. They're not that bothered about it. They get enough investment. They're not bothered about investment up north. Up north, they want the investment, and they don't really care about the taxes as long as, obviously, not taking the piss. Whereas what they got the high taxes and the no investment. So it's like, Sunak, I know, I'll screw both of you over. How old that? That's even, isn't it?
Have you seen the pure copium that I think it was Alexander Shokum is the MP for Rother Valley put out?
I can't remember.
Oh,
which one was it?
Oh my word! So he is coping super hard because they managed to win a Conservative councillor by-election in Dinning. Right. And he's like, oh my God, the Conservatives are winning in South Yorkshire. We're winning in South Yorkshire. Well, congratulations, you only managed to win one, council seat.
Yeah.
The turnout was like 500 people or something.
Yeah, on a 27% turnout, 9,000 electorate, 2,000 ballot votes.
It's not bad for a council by-election.
Yeah. It was actually quite high. I was expecting it to be a lot lower, to be honest. And I think they only had about a 200 lead. And in local council elections, to win, sometimes you only need like 200 or 300 votes to swing a win. And it's you're celebrating that.
Do you think the concrete's the final? Oh, come on, give me a pun. Give me a pun, Ollie. I was going to say the straw that broke the camel's back.
Do you think the concrete's finally going to crack?
Oh, the con and Conservative.
It will sink them down to the bottom of the the river in the US in New York.
Are they pouring Rishi's concrete shoes already?
Yes.
Do you think this is the final thing? Then I'm going to throw that over to Ollie. Ollie, do you think this is the final thing for the Conservative Party, the Concrete Party?
It's difficult, really. I think it all comes down to what happens at the Conservative Party conference. I think Sunak has got to go out and he's got to perform. And I think he's got to say to the Conservative Party, we are either ready or not ready for a general election. And this is either going to be the last conference before a general election, or if they really want to eke it out, there will be another conference before the next general election. Depends how far they want to try and push it. But to be honest, it entirely depends on the Conservative MPs. If they feel that they've had enough, that they really cannot take it anymore, that they know they're going to lose, that there's no turning this ship around, then they'll go for it. And I think they'll try anything they can to try and win, especially the Red Wall MPs. I mean, I'll tell you now, come election morning, oh my word. Oh, the articles that are going to be written by those Red Wall MPs blaming Rishi Sunak and everybody else for their defeat. The copium is going to be unbelievable. So if I die like a week after the general election, it's because I've had an overdose of copium and I just couldn't take it anymore.
The thing is, no one will care about those. It'll be the MPs remaining that they need to worry about.
Oh, yeah.
Because they'll suddenly have no power. They're back to being MPs that can't win. I'll tell you what is interesting. So Redfield and Wilton's polling this week. So in the red wall, it has Labour leading on all 15 of their issues, which includes asylum. So the Conservatives are pushing asylum like nothing else. They're using up all their bandwidth on it. Because remember, you can't, I say this about Labour, because you don't usually have to say about the Conservatives. They're usually aware of this. You can't just garble everything out. You have to focus on key messages that are going to resonate with the key voters who will, you have to know your audience. So when you're talking to the mainstream media, you're thinking of certain key voters. And they've just been creating noise around asylum. And the only place it works is the red wall. And it's not doing, because there's either not enough people there, or there's the people are not going to vote for incompetence, so they'll either vote for the craziness of Reform UK or the realistic competence of Labour. But on asylum, and they've got a fairly hefty lead. Where was it again? Let me find it. Specifically,
that's according to the stats. That's the hot topic, basically.
Yeah, I have to say it is actually immigration rather than specifically asylum. But given that the Tories have ramped up asylum, you'd think it's like the most important issue with this immigration. Labour have a +8% lead. Their smallest lead is +5%, and that's on Ukraine, where Labour are basically going, we're not that different to the Tories. That's the one thing where they're basically saying we're not that different to them. We're sort of supporting them on it.
But you're not going to win. You're not going to win an election on that.
Yeah.
So it's utterly so, and Labour still have a 5-point lead on that, and that's balmy. That's like people going, okay, they're saying the same. That is basically people saying you're not distinguishing yourself on it, but I believe Labour will be more competent. That's can be the only explanation, surely.
Well, Grant Shapps is now in charge of that. So
oh yeah,
he great things.
I mean, here's the thing, right? He drops a couple of clangers. One of them I don't blame him for. He was asked, as you would be, because he's shown no interest in defence, how many ranks in the army? I don't think you need to know that as a defence minister. But I'll tell you what, when he was talking about how delighted the RAF were with their aircraft carriers, it's like, you actually don't know anything, do you?
He needs to hire a few consultants, maybe like Michael Green.
He needs to not talk. He has access to advice. He needs to not say anything until he's briefed, but he's far too lazy. He's like so many others. He's lazy. And he thinks because he can turn on the charm that he'll just get through it. But he's just... The only reason he hasn't been ridiculed more is because, Rishi Sunak has made an even bigger balls of this week.
What do you think, Max? Do you think the schools issue is the final nail in the coffin?
I think it depends on how long it goes on for. So and I don't see it improving anytime soon, because you're going to hear about more and more schools. And it's not just schools, it's also other public buildings like courts. There's even residential properties that could be affected as well. So this is going to go on, and they're not planning to fix it. So it's not like I think they could resolve the problem by saying, okay, we have this money set aside, we're going to invest it straight away, we're going to rebuild these schools, we're going to throw everything at it. But they don't seem to be interested, and I think it was Gillian Keegan who said to Byline, she said, or she was covered by Byline, she said something like, well, let's just do nothing for the next 2 years and let somebody else deal with it.
Yes.
We just need to keep the lid on this for 2 years, and then it's someone else's problem.
That is what they're doing. There's no plan. Like, their plan is just to carry on building at the current rate, which is what's created this problem, because it's not enough. It's not a high enough rate.
Well, that in itself was a huge issue, because it was on the BBC that they managed to get the private secretary on with Nick Robinson to talk about what the actual situation was. And he said, originally we said 400, then it was slashed to 200, then it was slashed to 100. And when I left, I found out it was down to 50. Sky News then broke and said, well, Rishi made that promise, shows a clip of Rishi making the promise, we're going to put in 50 a year, blah, blah, blah. And Sky then immediately comes out that day and says,
now that equates to about 50 schools a year that will be refurbished or rebuilt.
I revealed in the last hour that Rishi Sunak said 50 schools a year would be rebuilt under his programme, which began 2 years ago. How many have been completed? just 4.
This is classic Tory. This is what has happened since David Cameron came into office. It's, you have a problem. We need X amount to fix this problem. We don't really either want to fix this problem, or we'll rather give you less money.
Yeah.
The levelling up white paper, if you remember that. The first 2 chapters were like, levelling up, we're going to do it. We need this amount of money to all do it. And then you come to the actual treasury section of what the money they're going to spend, and it's not even close.
It's quite funny with Michael Gove, if it's a tragic, because he's like pretty much the only competent member of cabinet, and his job for the past few years has been to come up with regeneration plans, and he does it. And then whichever monkey's in charge at the time goes, yeah, we're not doing that, it costs money.
I mean, so I mean, you've done some amazing wordplay there, because I mean, does anyone remember that genetics document that Cummings came out with that was given over to Gove, suggesting that genetics was more important than teaching?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Dominic Cummings could be topical today as well, because we've as well as Horizon, we've just entered the Copernicus program, which is a satellite program. Do you remember Boris Johnson giving Dominic Cummings $500 million to buy out a bankrupt satellite company that specialised in the wrong type of satellites for the purpose? And somehow that was going to get us the right type of satellites. There's this company that couldn't make a living, that couldn't make a profit from building the satellites it's good at, but apparently it'll give us a source of cheap, suitable satellites for which they have no expertise that'll rival Europe's.
And it launches from Russia, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't do anything because obviously it was money completely wasted.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anything. We're now back in Copernicus.
That's our Dom.
We are now going to be joining Copernicus again and doing it properly.
So that was a complete. I mean,
How long before the UK rejoins Erasmus?
That'll be Labour. The Tories have no interest in that because that's helping young people. I agree with David Hennig. What the Tories will be wanting they'll want a deal on extending the grace periods on rules of origin for electric cars, because that is imminent. And they don't get an economic boost if they get it, but they get an economic hit if they don't. And that's happening at the end of this year. So unless they want that general election right now, they can't afford that. So he'll push for that very strongly. But Erasmus, it's like, so you think about it, like there's Tory MPs, hard Brexit Tory MPs are whining in the media and the party, are whining. Well, obviously it has to be in the party if they're MPs, but Tory, should we say. They're whining about this, the rejoining Horizon, saying it's all crap and all the rest of it. So Rishi Sunak, to get this, has had to fight a bit of a battle. He's obviously got enough MPs to go, well, we get economic benefits from this. Whereas Erasmus, they won't see that. It's basically pulling out of Erasmus was cultural vandalism, not so much. I mean, I don't know how much it affects the economy, but it's more cultural. But so he will be able to expend political capital for an economic boost. And it has to be an economic boost before the election. Or in this case, I'll say not a boost, but at least not a loss. So I agree with Hennig on that one.
I mean, we could talk about Erasmus being a long-term investment because it brings in connections to I mean, it isn't just Europe, Erasmus. Erasmus is more than just Europe, but it would have brought up connections. And we could also talk about helping with IQ. And it's interesting you talk about it as another thing that they don't want to do with the youth. Rishi's already on record saying he didn't really want to help out the university students.
Yes.
They're complaining about the number of people going to university. They've come up with a batshit crazy idea of bringing back in national service. And you're like, but we've got a shortage. Why are you bringing that in? Like, do you want? It's almost like they want people to be drones.
Yes, that's
given
exactly
orders
what they want.
and just
thrown
in and ordered around.
Yes, that is precisely what they want.
None of this. I mean, part of the argument, which we've just talked about Horizon, we've talked about some of the other products in Cummings. Cummings wanted, and Boris said this as well. He wanted us to get a step up and improve our lot as a country by increasing the educational standards within the UK. And Cummings's paper that was on genetics was saying there's a lot of problems within the education system. It's not fit for purpose, and we're gonna have problems down the road. when you look at all of these things, it almost looks like they're on some sort of neo-Darwinian project to have like a lower class and this upper class that controls the lower class. I mean, and you look at all the little bits and pieces that are going along with it, and you look at a colonial imperial history, which definitely advocated this stuff in the 1900s. You listen to Boris, who's quoted in The Spectator saying that we should be in charge of Africa because we did such a rip-roaring job last time. Yeah, I know. And so I'm just going, these colonial attitudes seem to be still prevalent within the Conservative Party, and it's a form of neo-social Darwinism. Everything and the good always get to the top.
Well, that's why they were after a trade deal with India that's now stuck in negotiations.
Well, they've said there's not going to be any extra visas for students. Okay, there'll be no trade deal then.
No.
Yep. Because that's what
India
India
are
wants.
renowned for it. India are renowned for their trade deals, and they just walk away. They don't care.
Yeah.
And again, it's this imperialism. Oh, we've got this special connection.
But can we bring it back to class, where and in relation to concrete, how many private schools do you think are affected by RAC or have to get? And then how many Tory MPs' children are going to state schools?
There might be some,
Yeah.
They'll not all be wealthy enough to have taken their kids to private school, but they'll not be the influential ones.
Yeah, they'll be in. As we say in Sheffield, there's a very infamous school called Silvervale. It's a public school, but it's in like the good area. And I had a friend who went from teaching in Rotherham, in one of like the worst schools in Rotherham, to teaching at Silvervale, and it was night and day, to a point where if a child did not turn up with like a protractor or pencil case, the parent would be in the next day and buy them a.
I can tell you about. There was a school when I was just qualifying. At the time, I was doing job interviews around Manchester, and there's one there, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was like there was someone who was local to Manchester. Oh, it's really rough there. But what had happened is, it had been a head teacher had come in, made it selective, all the rest of it. So all of a sudden, it was like top drawer, but also absolutely zero tolerance. There was a kid there. I know someone who taught there. I was talking to them, and the rules were, as they often are in schools, you take your coat off before you walk into the classroom. One kid took their coat off as they were walking into the classroom, suspended for a day. It's like, you don't mess about here, son. So when you have that sort, and they can get away with it because if the parent wants to kick up a fuss, it's like, right, you go to the school where your GCSE grades will drop. We've got plenty of people banging on the doors to come here, which is wrong. It's wrong to have that, but at the same time, no kids pissed about there. I did not get that job. I didn't slag off their system, but I did not get the job. I could have done with that system because I was actually really bad at behaviour management in schools. I was fine in colleges, not in schools. So I would never go back to a school, really.
Second year students are always a bit luck of the draw.
Well, I find, if you mean like year 8s, I find that they sort of go on the turn partway through the year. They sort of turn into monsters, basically, which I just obviously lack any sort of understanding of them. So I abandoned that as a bad job.
You heard it here, folks. Children turn into monsters.
Well, more specifically, I wasn't good at turning them back. But maths was easier than science, because they can't really weaponize too much in a maths class.
What were they doing
was a
with
problem.
the burners?
I know. Well, even like power packs, they'll try and turn them into arc welders.
But Phil, don't you know that 7 eats 8? No, that was terrible. That was terrible. That was terrible.
Moving swiftly on.
That was bad. that was bad. I'll go now.
Talking about bad numbers. All the councils are broke.
Oh my word!
Who's done the bad maths there?
Phil is bringing us up a nice.
There's a graphic.
Nice graph
so this is the Institute for Fiscal Studies produced this recently, and the black line is for England, councils in England. There are some others, like you can see there. metropolitan districts and London boroughs, but the England ones, right? And this is real terms funding. So between 2009-10 and 2020 to 2021, remember where you can see a little tick up there because they were getting COVID funding, which was also not enough. But it's nonetheless dropped by 15% in real terms. And of course, they're poking at Labour because that's obviously it's a Birmingham because it's a Labour council. But there are more Conservative councils gone to the wall than Labour councils, but they don't mention them. And it is because although, yes, some of them are incompetent, because at the end of the day, what is a councillor? A councillor is someone who's got the time to be a councillor. They're not paid properly, so you can't give up a job.
Well, they're not paid at all.
No, they do technically get some money that's supposed to cover expenses, but you don't get something that allows you to give up a job if you're in work. So you've got a really limited pool of people who can become councillors, and then some of those may bite off more than can chew because they'll still be working while doing it, so they may not be able to dedicate the time. Yeah,
or they're already wealthy.
Yes,
it's what you generally find on council.
So you usually find in any council, doesn't matter about the party, about half of them are all right and half of them are on the take or just useless. But at the same time, when the government have been cutting funding for councils like this in real terms, of course they're going to get into money problems. It's not like they were swimming in gold when Labour were in charge. Because apart from anything else, Labour, I mean, Keir Starmer's talking about, devolving lots of power everywhere, but Tony Blair was not. So he liked sort of to have a bit of a control of things anyway. The idea that he would throw generous amounts of money to people who would, in his view, probably waste it and he'd get blamed for it, was a bit remote. So they had enough money, but they did not get a lavish bit of funding. And even that has gone down.
But isn't it a case of you have, funding is down, but you also have inflation, which is making everything more expensive?
Well, this is real terms. So okay. they did this in real terms.
But isn't there another issue that if councils want to increase council tax above a percentage, they actually have to put it to a referendum?
They do, yes. Yep. So the government decide by how much percent they can increase it. And they've had to increase that figure over the course of the Conservatives' time in office because they just simply weren't giving them enough from central funds. But yes, they have to have a referendum if they want to raise it further.
Does anyone else feel like we're in class with Phil? Like the whiteboard.
Did you take off your coat?
I need to go to the toilet, sir.
Oh dear, don't.
Oh, it's for the flashbacks. You can see it already.
So what happens when a council becomes bankrupt? Is it central government start filling in the gaps, or?
In all honesty, I don't really know a great deal. It's more of a recent thing. There have been councils in the past that have obviously pissed away all their money. Very famously, a Labour council in Liverpool, wasn't it, in the early 80s, on which Neil Kinnock based his famous speech. Which eventually sort of elbowed militants out of the way. But by and large, it doesn't happen very often, but it's been happening for quite a few. I think there's 26 councils are in trouble, but I think 8 councils have actually gone bust. And most of them are Conservative. There's 2, I think, Labour. And well, at the moment, see, there's a couple where one's Labour and one's Lib Dem, but that was only this year. They were Tory councils. It's just the local elections this year that changed them. So
wasn't that Woking? Aren't they also?
Woking is one, yes.
Woking 1.2 billion debt.
Something like that. And even Birmingham was in debt when Labour took over the council.
Yep. The reason why Birmingham's in debt so much is because back in 2012 they've had to settle quite a significant amount for fair pay laws.
Yeah,
that's the big reason why that's happened to them. And the big reason why most of these councils are in trouble is because of austerity. They're being told to do more with less. That is the big issue. Yeah. That is what all these councils are now continually having to do. And this is what's causing
responsibility
problems
as well. Isn't it social services they now have to?
Yes. Social services is the big one.
Which is just absolutely draining them. And it just then depends. They might have an older population, which is happening in town.
Yeah, it's a continuing older population, and they have to spend more and more on it. And if you're, as we said, if you're a council, do more with less, there comes a breaking point. And if you look at all these councils, at the moment, it has been something that has caused that breaking point, whether it has been bad investments or, as in the case with Birmingham, it was the payouts for the fair pay cases that they've had to do. It has so far always been, they've been skirting the edge, and then something's happened, something unexpected's come along and it's rocked them. And that's what's happened to most of these councils so far. And I think there's going to be a lot more this year, because officially 2023, this is when the EU funds dry up.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I would not be surprised.
But the Tories have said that the Brexiteers said that they would equal EU funds.
Yeah, they do tell the odd lie.
The farmers are still waiting for some money.
But I mean, the thing on the council...
surely their promises are set in concrete.
Yes, they are.
In rack concrete. It will last for years.
But I mean, the one for me...
There comes in that bigger problem. I mean, they keep banging on about immigration being an issue, but our birth rate's at 156. London's at pull. I mean, you've made me think about this and going, well, if certain areas are just filling up with old people and no youth are staying, and they're moving out, and they're moving most likely, or there's a very good chance they'll be moving to a big city, a very good chance it'll be London. I'm just thinking to myself, there's similar problems in Italy, isn't there, Max?
Yeah.
You've got emptying towns.
In its southern region, which has historically been dependent on agriculture, hides 6,000 abandoned villages. Ghost towns forever frozen in time, with the last generation who still remembers life inside of them still alive.
Well, it's actually gone a bit further, because that sort of thing suits the Tories. That's what happened in places like Hartlepool. So you were left behind with homeowners and the elderly. So it changed because the young would moving out because there's no opportunities there. So you changed it from a Labour area to a more Conservative area. It wasn't about any particular leader. It was just natural demographic changes. But interesting with London, because London's becoming too expensive for young people to afford at all, that more of them are commuting from the sort of belt outside it. So actually, more young people are now around London living in what were sort
Tory
of
areas.
Tory areas. So it's actually it's going the other way now, and it, hurting the Conservatives.
Can I throw out a question to all of you guys? If you were able to if you were in charge, what would you do to fix the housing crisis? We can start with Ollie. If you were Prime Minister tomorrow, what would you do to fix the housing crisis?
Really, it's a multifaceted question. That, as Father Jack would say,
that would be an ecumenical matter.
That would be an ecumenical question. You've got to, first of all, you've got to build houses. That's the first thing. You've actually got to build proper socialized housing, and you've got to make sure that is what is being built, because the Tories pretty much left it into private companies to do that. They don't want to build that type of housing. There's schemes up and down the country of where they've gone to councils and said, we're going to build all these thousands of social housing on this site. Aren't you lucky? And then all of a sudden, that's not what gets built. So you've got to have the ability for councils to be able to ensure that that's the type of housing that gets built. If not, they can maybe build it themselves. The other thing we've got to do is tackle renting. Bring in rent control, whether you do it nationally or whether you do it by it's left to local council. I'm not sure, but maybe that will cause different fluctuations, undoubtedly. But we'll see. Those are the two things, because you've got to tackle renting, and I think you've got to really start putting taxes on people who own multiple homes, and those are the landlords, and you've got to start freeing up stock, because that's the big problem.
I would add to that. I agree with that. I would add to it. The difficulty in terms of exactly what I do depends on whether we're going to bring in PR or not. If we don't, then if we build social housing and rent it out, then the Tories will come straight in and sell it off. If we can last longer, then you can do that. But what you could do is you could still have nationalised house building to go alongside private house, because you can't possibly have enough of one or the other, and sell it cheaply to people who are on low incomes, so they get cheap mortgage. At least sell it cheaply and they get a private mortgage. I would prefer it was almost like student debt, where you have that, because it wouldn't cost more than that for a house. And you just pay it off over time. But that's, you can't just turn that over overnight. You would have to keep the Tories out forever for that. But I would certainly say you don't build social housing for rent if you're not going to stop the Tories coming back in, because they'll just sell it. They will just sell it all like they did before.
Alex, you're in London, so what's your take from a London point of view?
So everything they've said, both Phil and Ollie, spot on. It would be 3D printing as well. I'd just bring it in. I'd just get rid of the tax on it and I was running the numbers. It's 10 times quicker. You're increasing your capacity to build by 10. Probably have to increase concrete, and you probably have to increase production of the actual machines. IKEA are apparently looking at it at the moment, which is a huge step forward. But if you put up a 2-story house in 2 weeks with 7 people, you are putting yourself in a position where you can construct stuff very quickly. I think the highest building they did was about 5 years ago. It was in China. It was 5 stories. So you can do a 3D printed house that's 5 stories tall. I think at the minimum you could at least get the first 2 stories even on a large tower block. And I'd be doing the stuff that they're doing in Vienna. Most housing in Vienna is owned either by local council or by the state and rented out, and it puts a rent control price in there. Interestingly, I'm getting wind that the banks are moving a little bit more in that direction as well. I think there's at least 3. I know JP Morgan's one of them. I think Chase is another one. They're investing in buying housing in the UK to then rent out, and they're going to get their revenue from that. They're not going to sell the properties, which is very interesting. But from what I've been told, one of the problems that the councils in London have is that they can't afford to build on the brownfield sites that they already own. Private, public share of responsibility. There's a lot to be said about that as a stepping stone and getting people onto the housing ladder. But the longer term concern is if we build too much and our population continues to drop, housing's going to be worthless. That's a lot. That could be 10, 20 years away before we start to see that as a bigger problem. So that's something else to be concerned with.
Yeah, we're not Japan yet.
We're about 20 years behind.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Well, Japan's weird when it comes to its buildings.
Sorry,
because the land is worth more than the actual house. So if you were to, let's say you built a brand new house, and let's say it gets valued, we'll just keep it easy, 100 grand. 10 years later, it might be worth 50. So it's the property decreases in value, but not the land. And that's why sometimes in Japan, you can go and pick up really cheap housing, but the building itself will be completely dilapidated because what you're buying is the land, not the actual, the physical property.
There was just as you said that, there was a very interesting documentary I saw on YouTube about a change in culture in Japan where people would refuse to move into properties where somebody had died, because they believed that the spirit or whatever would remain in the property. But a lot of young people are, because changes in attitude to cultural issues, they have said, like, to hell with that, I want a cheap property. And the value of some of the properties, because somebody had died in it, is in some cases almost half. But as soon as you move in, then the curse is lifted, so you can sell the property after at a normal rate.
You just got to stomach one night in a possibly
haunted property.
Yeah.
This is it. Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to go to Japan and set up our own Ghostbusters organization. That's what we need to do. That's what we'll do. That's how we'll become millionaires.
Sunday roast.
Well, we will, because we won't need all that high-powered equipment. We just need a sleeping bag.
Yes.
That's true. But where's the fun? Where's the fun of trying to build a nuclear reactor?
And a bit of courage.
I feel like you could double it. You could get the sleeping bag and you film the night in there, and you film the docuseries. You've de-haunted houses by living in them for a night.
and sell it to Netflix.
What's been going on over in the US? We talked about Japan. Let's talk about America. We've got like 3 massive stories that have come out of there over the summer when we went on holiday, and I don't even know where to begin with it. You've got Trump, you've got the mad congressional hearing on UFOs, and then you've got the Hunter Biden story that a lot of people are saying is a conspiracy. It's been like put under the carpet.
But can I start off, and then we'll bring in the other guys. But I'm sort of disinterested in the Trump story until I see him in prison. Because then it'll be really interesting, because he allegedly he's going to run for president from prison, sort of opposite a sort of evil Lula. Anyway, I think the more interesting one was the aliens one. I don't believe in UFOs and stuff like this, but I did find it interesting how there was a guy in a congressional hearing talking about alien bodies and objects flying faster than the speed of sound or something like that. Impossible objects flying faster than the speed of sound.
You mean Tic Tacs?
Yes,
the
Tic Tacs.
Yeah,
Tic Tacs. Experiments on animals or something like that. But just the fact that they were talking about it, I thought it was interesting.
There was an element of, is this like a version of the X-Files?
Yeah.
Being made out to be real. Have they actually got Fox Mulder, the real Fox Mulder, out on TV? I don't even know where to begin with it. It's absolutely mad to come out.
I don't know. It seems to me from like the American people that I follow, they've all gone, no, those guys were just full of it. They were presenting no real evidence. They were saying all this, grandiose stuff, but really there was no evidence. There was no photos. There's no stuff. And every time they were questioned, they were like, well, I can't actually answer that, wink, if you know what I'm saying. But I can disclose it to you within a secure room. And I very much doubt that there will be any more follow-up on this, to be honest. My bigger interest was in the Republican debate, which, oh my word.
They make Brexiteers look intelligent, do they?
Yeah. I mean, you had, was it Vivek Vishwami, I think his name is, this tech billionaire. Everyone's what do you believe that climate change is a hoax? And everyone's just like putting their hands up, and it's just like, okay, yeah, there's a party that doesn't believe in science. That's not worrying at all.
I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax. More people are dying of bad climate change policies than they are of actual climate change.
Some of the stuff that I think is going to be insane and probably cross over to our politics is, if we do have another Conservative leadership contest, how big will the shadow of Boris Johnson loom over that contest? I mean, you had Trump, who essentially was running, but not even there, because according to him, why do I even need to be there? There's no one close to my numbers. Why do I need to dignify?
Slightly arrogant.
Yeah. So. And yeah, honestly, it was just bizarre from start to finish. But the two people who are the most worrying, who luckily are both not going to win, again, is Vivek, because he's pretty much a fascist. You don't want someone like him coming in to run the US government as a business. And then Ron DeSantis, who is a slightly more competent Trump.
Only slightly.
Yeah, only slightly. And he's getting into a massive feud with Disney. And I think I said this before on another panel show. But you don't mess with Disney.
You don't talk to me like that.
They can afford very expensive lawyers.
Oh yes, they've got money.
Share prices are tanking though. Absolutely tanked. They've not put out any decent. I think Games Workshop. There you go. Good to put a plug in. I think Games Workshop share prices will eventually overtake them if they get the Warhammer series up and running. It sounds like they're going to be doing that with Amazon. Just on a slight tangent.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, I don't think he's got a chance taking on Disney. I think he's an.
You say that all the films haven't done great, but they've made their money back. Elemental, one of them recently started off as an absolute flop. But over time, it eventually sort of built up, and it made more of its money back. They've had not flash in the pans like they've had the big box office weekend blowouts, but they've had like over time they've made their money back, and that's not what's been reported. But of course, you've had all the right wings going, Disney's losing. Well, not when you look at their records. They're still making a significant amount of money. But that'll be interesting to see how that works out, because I think Disney's going to just start funding Democrats and any opposition that will put up against DeSantis, and that'll be the end of DeSantis. But DeSantis himself doing a lot of crazy stuff in Florida.
Banning books.
Well, that is the state for it.
Yeah. And the second, I think, if he ever was the candidate, I think the rest of America would look at that and just go,
Florida,
why are we electing Florida man?
Florida is like is like America's Hartlepool. You know, you have all the people, the moderate people moving out and the crazies moving in. No offense to Hartlepool, just, you know, the way you said it.
Oh no, they deserve it. They hung that monkey. They haven't. If they've shown no interest in moving on from hanging that monkey.
What do you think of this all, Phil? I mean, there are three stories.
I think America exists to make us look normal, quite frankly. It's mad. It's incredibly polarized. Everything's tribal. Like, I mean, you mentioned Boris Johnson, but actually Boris Johnson lost a lot of support. A lot of the people who backed him don't back him anymore. In the party, it's not even known how much support he even has in the party. He certainly doesn't have as much as he thought in public. Whereas Trump, he's not really lost any support, has he?
Yeah.
It's just stayed fixed.
He's lost his swing vote.
30% of the Republicans still support him.
He's got his core, which is about 75,
but they've got
79
guns.
million. But he's not added to it. He's not going to.
No.
Well, I mean, I say this. Go on, Phil.
I was going to say, Boris Johnson could not do what Donald Trump is doing. You know, he could not pack out rallies or anything like that. You know, he's reduced to writing Daily Mail articles. He's probably not even writing them. In fact, that's the thing. Someone, I've forgotten who it was now.
Is Boris using ChatGPT?
No, someone else will be. Someone, I've completely forgotten who it was. But a guest writer for either the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday. An article was written in her name that really didn't sound like her. And people were saying, "Oh, you write this?" She said, "No." She said they do this. They use ghost writers and just use the person's name. So we don't know that Boris Johnson's written anything.
What? Boris not doing his work? Who could think that?
So who knows? He may have done. He may have done, but we don't know that.
There are two topics that have united the Republicans and the Democrats, weirdly enough. Because you were right. Other than that, they're divided. But the two topics appear to be Brexit, which has pissed off both the Republican Party and the Democrats, because they both lay a little bit of claim to the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes,
but interestingly enough, and this is something that didn't get reported that much, but we go back to the UAPs. It looks like Republicans and Democrats who were in that congressional meeting were saying afterwards how well they got on discussing the topic and trying to come to some sort of resolution. I mean, we can debate the topic of the actual sources, but the actual other key topic is the Pentagon, who have clearly been going off and doing whatever the hell they want for at least 70 years. And it was fascinating as well afterwards. There was something else that came out in a post-conference. There were two Republican congresspeople and a Democrat doing a press conference immediately after the congressional hearings, and they were making threats to the Pentagon.
3 United States congressmen were denied by our military. We're supposed to be telling them what to do, not the other way around. And so we're going to continue on that path. But I want you to think about this. Think about this, that something with the capabilities of traveling light years, not showing a heat signature, and the energy capabilities of that would put the Pentagon out of business. We wouldn't be fighting these worthless wars overseas over oil, and American boys and girls wouldn't be dying. It would put the war pigs out of business, and they'd have to go somewhere else, and I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
Which in itself is insane. I cannot imagine any business organization saying, I have no control over this department and I'm going to have to go out on public TV and threaten them. And what they actually said to the Pentagon was, either you get us on board and explain what you're doing and you justify it and you give us oversight, or we are going to defund you and we are going to sack you. That was coming out of Republicans and Democrats. So whether or not we can go with the whole thing of UFOs and debate that, but the fact is they are coming out on TV and telling journalists they are threatening the Pentagon. That in itself is mind-blowing. And I'll also add into this, it's not just Congress. The White House has sanctioned a lot of the stuff that's being said in there, and they are also sanctioning the SCIFs, the secure rooms where only congressional people and presidential aides can hear about what's being learned and discussed and stuff in the Secrecy Act. So I'm going, it isn't just Congress. The people that seem to have absolved themselves of this is the Senate, which is weird in itself, because the Senate is actually meant to be the ones having the oversight over the Pentagon, and they've been silent about the whole thing because they're like, we don't want to look crazy and we don't want to. This is not a vote-winning topic. But I think the whole thing is completely mad. But there you go. There are two topics, and one of them is Brexit, which is united Democrats and
the
Republicans.
Irish lobby is huge.
Yeah.
You can have had, as the president has, you can have had an Irish ancestor 300 years ago. You've never been to Ireland in your life, but you're Irish. So it's absolutely massive.
That's what I noticed when I went to Dublin. The amount of Americans you can hear when you're walking about.
What's funny about that is that there's a new accent. An accent has actually evolved over the last 10 or 15 years, which is a sort of mix between a posh Dublin accent and an American accent. That's something quite interesting. But it is true about the influence and you know, whenever I hear about the European Convention on Human Rights being thrown in the bin by the Tories, I think the American lobby the Irish lobby in the US is sort of the firewall to that, because if the Tories end up damaging the Good Friday Agreement, there'd be sanctions.
That would destroy it, because the whole thing's pinned on human rights laws.
Yep. They'll never do it. It'll be probably the big thing, you know, the in vogue thing to talk about, but the realities of doing it, I think there are enough, shall we say, sensible, and I do this in massive quotation marks.
Well, we hope there are.
We thought that might have been the case with Brexit.
Who would you rather have as a winner? Biden, who seems to be having huge mental difficulties. I think yesterday he was giving a medal to an 81-year-old 4-star general and walked off the stage mid-ceremony. Or do you give it to Donald Trump, who is stupid and crazy?
You don't give it to Trump straight away. You just never give it to Trump.
The thing is, Biden, if you actually look at how he's been running the country, there's a lot to credit him for. He's clearly too old. It's one of those things. Obviously, the Democrats do not have anyone else, because if they did, they would use them. Because he is too old.
Yeah,
but at the same time, he's running the country.
State.
Yeah,
they're in a transitional state. You've got the old guard, and then you've got the new, who are still coming in, but they're still sort of too inexperienced to really take over. And the old guard, especially the Democratic Party, don't really want to let go of the reins yet. And you've got Mitch McConnell freezing, I think, twice in giving speeches recently.
Yeah.
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
And you know, he's the bigwig of the
he was the speaker.
Yeah,
but when it comes to that weight as well, he's literally like. You're like, wow, this is... Sorry, Max, you were going to say...
No, I was about to say, but like when it comes to Biden, the mistakes he makes are gaffes. like there isn't any. He hasn't made any really big, policy mistakes. I think I don't think he's done anything on the world stage which has embarrassed the United States or some bad policy. I think whatever he has done that is embarrassing is limited to something he did, like giving out a medal or saying the wrong country, or he's made a lot of gaffes, but I think the damage they have done is extremely limited compared to what Trump has done. That's why Trump shouldn't be anywhere near the White House again.
Well, good to know those are our two choices for the Western world. On that cheerful note, bye everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you've gone this far, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you to all our supporters. Bye for now.
Be sure to tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.